Erika Delgado woke in the swamp with mud against her face, firelight moving somewhere behind her, and the smell of burned fuel in the air. A few minutes earlier, she had been inside an airplane with her mother, her father, and her younger brother, waiting for the final part of a trip from Bogota to Cartagena. Then the DC-9 dropped out of the night, struck the ground near María La Baja, and came apart so violently that people in the area saw the flash before they knew what had happened. Erika was 9 years old. She did not understand why she was alive in the wet darkness, or why the voices around the wreckage were fading. She only knew she was hurt, alone, and calling for help. The flight was Intercontinental de Aviación Flight 256, a domestic Colombian route operated by a McDonnell Douglas DC-914. The aircraft was registered HK3839X and was flying from Bogota toward Cartagena with a planned continuation beyond that route. On board were 47 passengers and 5 crew members. Erika was traveling with her parents and younger brother, seated with the family that had filled her world before the airplane became a field of fire and metal. The flight had been delayed earlier in the day because of a mechanical issue on a previous leg. By the time Flight 256 departed Bogota, evening had settled over Colombia. The aircraft climbed out from El Dorado International Airport and headed north toward the Caribbean coast. To the passengers, it was a normal late flight, the kind that ended with baggage, relatives, car rides, and sleep. There was no warning in the cabin that the airplane would never reach Cartagena. The crew guided the DC-9 down toward Rafael Núñez International Airport after dark. Air traffic control cleared the aircraft to descend in stages. The pilots reported as they came down through altitude. The danger was building inside the cockpit, in numbers, instruments, and a descent that was carrying the aircraft lower than the crew believed. Investigators later found that the captain's altimeter was showing a false reading, making the aircraft appear much higher than it actually was. The first officer's altimeter was functioning, but its lighting did not allow an easy comparison in the dark cockpit. There was no radar coverage in the area to warn controllers that the airplane was too low. The cockpit voice recorder was not operating properly. What remained was a descending aircraft, a crew losing awareness of the real altitude, and terrain rising unseen beneath them. At about 7:38 that evening, an Aero Corrales Cessna Caravan reported seeing aircraft lights descending rapidly, followed by an explosion on the ground. Flight 256 had struck near María La Baja, about 35 miles from Cartagena's airport. The DC-9 hit marshy ground, broke apart, and burned. The crash scattered wreckage across farmland and swamp. It killed the crew and nearly every passenger. Erika did not remember the full impact. Later accounts said she had been thrown clear of the aircraft and landed in soft swamp vegetation or a pile of plant matter that helped break the fall. She survived with a broken shoulder or arm, bruises, and shock. The injury should have been impossible to call minor, but beside the wreckage around her, it was exactly that. She had fallen from a destroyed airplane and was still breathing. In the first moments after the crash, there may have been confusion, movement, and screams. Erika later said her mother survived the initial impact long enough to help shield her from the fire, pushing her away from danger. That detail stayed with the story because it carried the last act of a mother inside a disaster that left almost no witnesses. Her mother's final effort became part of why she was not consumed by the burning wreckage. The crash site was not a clean field with ambulances waiting. It was dark, wet, and broken. Pieces of aircraft lay in mud and vegetation. Fire burned in places. The smell of fuel, smoke, and torn earth hung over the area. Erika called out from the swamp. She could hear people, but in a disaster like that, sound did not mean rescue was close. It meant the crash was still alive around her. Farmers and local residents came first. They heard the explosion and moved toward the wreckage before a formal rescue operation could fully reach the site. In the darkness near María La Baja, those civilians searched through wreckage and swampy ground, expecting bodies. Then they heard a child. Erika was found alive in the vegetation, calling for help. The rescuers who reached her were stunned. Around her were the remains of an airplane that had carried 52 people. There were no other survivors standing, crawling, or answering. Only Erika, injured and dazed, had come through the impact. She was taken to a hospital in Cartagena. Doctors found bruises and a broken shoulder or arm, but no injury that explained how she had survived the fall, the crash, and the fire. Reporters quickly called it a miracle. Colombian officials used the same word, but inside the hospital room, survival was not a headline. It was a child asking where her family was. Her parents and younger brother had died. Everyone else aboard had died too. Erika had gone from sitting with her family in an airplane cabin to being the only living passenger from a crash that killed 51 people. The number became part of every report, but it could not explain what it meant for a 9-year-old to wake up and find that the people beside her were gone. The story became even crueler when reports emerged from the crash site about looting. Erika said a necklace given to her by her father had been taken after the wreck. Authorities later acknowledged that looting had happened at the site. In a place where rescuers were searching for the dead and injured, someone had taken from a surviving child. Erika asked for the necklace to be returned. It was not. As investigators worked, early suspicions included the possibility of a bombing because the aircraft had appeared to explode. Colombia still carried the memory of Avianca Flight 203, destroyed by a bomb in 1989. But investigators found no evidence of explosives. The DC-9 had exploded when it struck the ground. The cause pointed back to controlled flight into terrain during approach, tied to instrument problems, crew error, loss of situational awareness, and the lack of radar support in that area. The technical findings showed how an aircraft full of people could be brought down without a fireball in the sky, without a missile, and without passengers ever understanding the danger. The crew believed they had more altitude than they did. The aircraft descended into the ground while still under control. The disaster came from a chain of failures inside the system that was supposed to keep the airplane above the terrain. For Erika, none of that changed the night. She had survived because she was thrown clear, because vegetation and swamp softened what should have killed her, because she landed away from the worst of the fire, because local people searched in the dark, and because her body held on long enough for them to find her. The crash of Intercontinental Flight 256 remained one of those survival stories that seemed impossible when reduced to facts. A 9-year-old girl fell from wreckage into swampy ground after a DC-9 crash. She suffered a broken bone and bruises. She lost her mother, father, brother, and everyone else aboard. She lived. But the truth of her survival was not clean or easy. It was not a story of walking away untouched. It was a story of impact, mud, fire, pain, and a child calling into the night from a crash site that had taken her entire family. It was also a story of civilians hearing that call and moving toward a place where most people had already died. Flight 256 left Bogotá as a delayed domestic trip and never reached Cartagena. At 7:38 in the evening on January 11, 1995, it crashed near María La Baja, Colombia, killing 51 of the 52 people aboard. The only survivor was Erika Delgado, a 9-year-old girl found alive in swamp vegetation after being thrown from the wreckage. Her survival did not make the disaster less terrible. It made one detail impossible to forget. In the middle of burned metal, mud, and darkness, one child was still alive. Thank you for listening to Horrifying Survival Stories. Subscribe for more stories of those who faced the impossible and lived.